Welcome to my channel Sci-Fi Love Story. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. The Convergence Forum drifted in silent orbit above the gas giant Talmura IX, a massive structure of metal, light, and carefully managed lies. It was one of the few places in known space where dozens of species could gather without killing one another within the first 5 minutes. That alone made it a miracle of engineering and diplomacy. The station had no single gravity. Instead, gravity shifted in wide zones, marked by subtle color changes in the floor. Air was layered and filtered, thicker in some sections, thinner in others. Temperature gradients flowed smoothly from cold to warm so that scaled beings, furred beings, and skin-bare beings could all exist without immediate discomfort. The result was beautiful and unsettling. Nothing here was natural. Everything was controlled. Elias Rowe stood near the human-designated atmospheric band, holding a glass of synthesized alcohol that tasted close enough to whiskey to fool the tongue, if not the soul. He wore the standard dark diplomatic jacket, simple and unadorned. Humans did not decorate themselves much at gatherings like this. Bright colors drew attention. Attention invited questions. Questions led to mistakes. And mistakes out here got people killed. Elias had attended 4 convergence summits before this one. The routine never changed. Arrive. Exchange polite words with species that barely tolerated humanity's presence. Smile. Nod. Leave before conversations became informal or dangerous. Tonight, though, something felt wrong. He could not explain it. The air felt heavier, even in the human zone. Conversations were quieter than usual. Laughter, already rare, was almost non-existent. Elias had learned to trust that feeling. Humans survived by noticing patterns before they became disasters. Too many of them, a voice muttered beside him. Elias did not turn immediately. Turning too fast could be read as nervousness. Instead, he took a slow sip of his drink. "Which ones?" he asked calmly. Marcus Hale, senior human envoy, stood beside him. Marcus had gray in his hair and tension permanently etched into his face. He had negotiated treaties that saved entire colonies, and his instincts were rarely wrong. "The Vierxians," Marcus said quietly. "More nobles than usual, especially from the old houses." Elias' fingers tightened slightly around the glass. The Vierxians were impossible to miss. Tall, pale, and unnervingly elegant, they moved through the crowd with slow confidence. Their eyes were dark and reflective, their movements smooth in a way that suggested coiled violence beneath absolute control. They were predators. Not metaphorically, biologically. 200 years ago, when humanity first encountered the Vierxians, entire frontier worlds vanished. Colonies went silent overnight. Survivors spoke of shadows that moved faster than sound, of beings that fed on blood and fear with equal hunger. Humanity survived not by winning, but by making war too costly. Treaties followed, borders were drawn, rules were enforced, and since then, humans and Vierxians existed in a state of careful distance. Marcus leaned closer. "If one of them looks at you too long, you leave. Don't hesitate, don't explain." Elias nodded, understood. "Especially," Marcus added, his voice dropping further, "if it's someone from House Kale." Elias had read the briefings. House Kale was ancient, powerful, and traditional. They believed fear was not something to eliminate, but something to preserve. "Why?" Elias asked. "Because they don't bluff," Marcus said, "and they don't forgive mistakes." Marcus's gaze flicked across the room, then froze. Elias felt it before he saw it. That sensation, like standing too close to the edge of something deep and endless. Against every instinct, Elias followed Marcus's line of sight. She stood across the hall, surrounded by other Vierxians who unconsciously gave her space. The light behaved differently around her, bending inward instead of reflecting. Her skin was pale, almost luminous, with faint patterns beneath it like veins of frozen starlight. Her dark hair fell freely down her back, decorated with something that might have been jewelry or might have been alive. But it was her eyes that held him. Black, completely black, no visible iris, no white, just depth. And they were fixed on him. "Elias," Marcus hissed, "do not look." "She's already looking at me," Elias whispered back, his throat dry. Breaking eye contact now would be worse. Marcus swore under his breath. "That's Lady Calith of House Kale. She does not attend these gatherings unless something matters." Elias swallowed. "What does she want?" Marcus's hand closed around Elias' arm, tight enough to hurt. "Nothing you can survive. If she moves, you leave. Immediately. Do you understand?" Elias nodded again, though his heart had begun to hammer against his ribs. Lady Calith moved. The crowd reacted instantly. Conversations died in spreading waves. Species that outweighed humans by tons shifted away from her path. Even beings that had no reason to fear her physically seemed uneasy. She walked toward Elias. Every instinct screamed at him to run. The protocol said to leave. The training said to escape. His survival instincts begged him to move. But something else held him still. If he fled now, it would confirm everything the Viarxians believed about humans. That fear ruled them completely. That proximity meant weakness. Calith stopped beside the empty chair next to him. Up close she was worse, and more beautiful. Her features were almost human, but too perfect, too precise. Her presence pressed against him like gravity, making it hard to breathe. "This seat," she said, her voice smooth and musical, carrying strange harmonics that resonated in his chest, "is available." The silence around them was absolute. Elias knew he had about 3 seconds to decide. He lifted his hand, palm open, and gestured to the chair. "Yes," he said clearly, "please." Shock rippled through the room. Marcus made a sound behind him that was half protest, half prayer. Calith studied Elias for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. Her teeth were white, slightly too sharp. She sat. The pressure intensified. Elias forced himself to breathe evenly to keep his posture relaxed. His body wanted to tremble. He refused to let it. "You did not flee," Calith said. "No," Elias replied. "You were warned." "Yes." "Yet you remained." "Yes." Her head tilted slightly, an almost curious gesture. "Why?" Elias considered lying, then rejected the idea. "Because running would have been fear making the decision," he said, "and fear already has too much power in this room." A flicker of something passed through her eyes, amusement, interest. "You fear me," she said, not a question. "Yes," Elias answered honestly. "Good," Calith replied. "Fear is appropriate." She leaned back slightly, her movements controlled and precise. "But fear that commands action without thought is weakness. You are afraid and still here." Around them, the crowd remained frozen, watching history balance on a knife edge. "You humans are strange," Calith continued. "Most prey either flee or submit." Elias met her gaze. It felt like staring into deep space. "We've had a lot of practice living with fear," he said. "It doesn't always mean we obey it." Her smile widened just a fraction. "You interest me," Elias rose. That admission sent a chill through him, far colder than fear. "For 2 centuries," Calith said softly, "humans and Viarxians have obeyed treaties built on distance. You believe distance keeps you safe." "And you?" Elias asked. "We believe distance keeps you controllable." The bluntness shocked him into a quiet laugh before he could stop himself. Calith's eyebrow rose, amusing. "Just honest," Elias said. "We pretend these gatherings are about peace, but really they're about avoiding disaster." "Yes," she agreed. "We perform civility while remembering what we are." She leaned closer. Elias felt his pulse spike. "I approached you to test something," Calith said. to see whether humans are still prey or something else. And Elias asked. Her eyes searched his face, his posture, his breathing. You did not challenge me, she said. You did not flee. You acknowledged danger without provoking it. She leaned back again. That is unusual. The crowd slowly began to breathe again. Whispers spread. Nothing had exploded. No one had died. Yet, I imagine your people are displeased, Caliph added, glancing briefly toward Marcus. They're terrified, Elias admitted. As they should be, she said calmly. But terror can be survived. Stagnation cannot. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy. This conversation, Caliph continued, has already changed things. Elias felt it too, eyes watching, assumptions breaking. Is that good or bad? He asked. Her smile returned, sharp and knowing. That, she said, depends on what you choose to do next. A server approached hesitantly, trembling limbs clicking softly. Envoy Row, the being said, avoiding Caliph's gaze entirely. Your delegation requests your presence. Elias looked at Caliph. She inclined her head slightly, permission. Tell them I'll join shortly, Elias said. The server fled. Caliph stood smoothly. Elias rose as well, manners drilled too deeply to ignore. We will speak again, she said. This is not finished. I didn't think it was, Elias replied. She paused, her dark eyes locking onto his once more. You chose proximity over fear, Caliph said. That choice has consequences. Then she turned and vanished into the crowd. Elias exhaled shakily for the first time in what felt like hours. Marcus rushed to his side, pale and furious. Are you insane? Possibly, Elias said, but I'm still alive. For now, Marcus muttered. As the gathering resumed, Elias felt the weight of unseen eyes and unspoken calculations. Something had shifted. Something fragile. Something dangerous. And humanity, once again, stood at the center of it. 3 days after the Convergence Summit, Elias Rowe sat alone in a sealed conference room aboard the human diplomatic vessel Resolute Path. The walls were smooth, featureless alloy, designed to prevent eavesdropping by species that could listen through vibration, heat, or electromagnetic bleed. A single table sat in the center. No windows. No distractions. This room existed for bad news. Elias kept his hands folded, steady by effort rather than comfort. He had replayed the moment 100 times already. The chair, the silence, Lady Caliph's eyes. The door slid open. Ambassador Lin Chen entered without ceremony. She was small, gray-haired, and carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had prevented wars without ever firing a weapon. She did not sit immediately. She studied Elias for a long moment. Do you understand, she said calmly, how close you came to starting an interstellar incident? Yes, Elias replied, within about 3 seconds. She sat. Reports flickered to life on the table's surface. Sensor recordings, transcripts, behavioral analysis from half a dozen intelligence agencies. You violated protocol, Chen said. You ignored direct instructions. You placed yourself within lethal proximity of a Vyrexian high noble. Yes. You survived, she continued. And now House Kale has made informal contact requesting further dialogue. Elias felt his chest tighten. That's unexpected. It's unprecedented, Chen corrected. They don't request changes, they impose them. She folded her hands. You are being reassigned. Elias nodded slowly. He had expected this. Demotion, removal, maybe exile to a backwater post. You will serve as human, Vyrexian liaison, Chen said. Effective immediately. Elias blinked. I'm not qualified. You are the only human who has sat beside a Vyrexian noble without triggering violence or retreat, Chen replied. That makes you uniquely qualified. She leaned forward slightly. You opened a door, now we need to see what comes through it. 6 weeks later, the Convergence Forum hosted another summit. This time, the tension was worse. Word had spread. Rumors traveled faster than ships. Humans and Virexians had spoken, not across tables, but side by side. Elias entered the hall wearing the same plain jacket, but the weight of expectation pressed down on him from every direction. Human delegates watched him with a mix of fear and hope. Other species observed from cautious distance, curious and uneasy. He took the same seat in the informal discussion zone. The ambient noise shifted. He felt it again, that deep sinking awareness. Lady Calith approached. The crowd did not panic this time, but they watched. This seat, she said, her voice carrying that same melodic gravity, is available. Yes, Elias said, please. She sat. A ripple passed through the room. What had been unthinkable was becoming precedent. You have changed roles, Calith observed. So have you, Elias replied. She smiled. House Kale has proposed revisions to the Accords. Elias' pulse quickened. That will upset many people. Yes, she said simply, including my own. She leaned slightly closer. The treaties were built on fear. Fear is stable until it is. Elias nodded. Humans know that well. Calith studied him. You are dangerous in a way most species fail to understand. That doesn't sound good. You adapt, she said. You endure. You survive fear instead of being ruled by it. Around them, others had drawn closer, not intruding, listening. Our kind sees prey as predictable, Calith continued. You have proven that assumption false. A sudden sharp sound cut through the hall. A junior delegate from a minor species had stumbled. A security drone misread the motion. Defensive systems powered up. The room froze. Several Virexians tensed. The air thickened with the promise of violence. Elias stood. Not fast, not slow. He placed himself between Calith and the panicking delegate. He raised his empty hands. Stand down, he said calmly. Not a command, a statement. The drone hesitated. Calith watched him closely. The moment stretched. Then the drone powered down. Breath returned to the room. Elias lowered his hands and sat back down. Calith's expression had changed. Something like respect burned behind her eyes. You placed yourself at risk, she said quietly. Yes. Why? Because someone had to show restraint first, Elias replied. Silence. Then Calith stood. Her voice carried across the hall. Observe, she said to the gathered species. The human did not threaten, he did not flee. He absorbed fear and allowed it to pass. She turned slightly, addressing her own kind. Humans are no longer prey. Shock hit the room like a wave. Prey runs, Calith continued. Prey panics, prey reacts. She looked back at Elias. This one did not. Murmurs erupted. The Accords will remain, Calith said, but they will evolve. Proximity will replace distance. Understanding will replace assumption. She inclined her head toward Elias in a formal Virexian gesture of respect. Elias returned it, steady despite the weight of the moment. Over the following hours, something subtle spread through the gathering. Mixed conversations, shared space, careful but real dialogue. No violence. No retreat. When the summit ended, Marcus approached Elias, shaking his head. You're either changing everything, he said, or breaking it. Probably both, Elias replied. Weeks later, new protocols were drafted, not perfect, not safe, but real. Humans became mediators, the species that could stand between predator and prey without collapsing. Standing alone at the viewport of the resolute path, Elias watched the stars drift past. Humanity had never been the strongest, never the fastest, never the deadliest, but they had learned something rare. how to sit beside fear, and not let it decide who they were. And the galaxy slowly began to learn the same. The end.